right, let's start strong, ladies and gentlemen. I've invited Angelo Ponzi of the Ponzi Group and Rich Cocuzzo of Sales Velocity Advisors to share with you how you can make the most out of 2019 for you and your firm. Angelo, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and Rich, welcome to Critical Mass Radio Show.
Thank you, Rick.
All right, so we're going to be talking about a couple things. One, I want to get them to share a bit of their background and their markets and what they do for people, but we're also going to be talking about here in a little bit on the show the presentations that they are giving inside the Critical Mass CEO peer group community. These gentlemen are two of the 24 faculty that we have within Critical Mass for Business in Orange County, California, of people who are teaching best practices and the latest trends in their various areas to the CEOs and business owners who belong to our community, and to rave reviews, I might say. They've been doing a bang-up job, and so we're going to talk a little bit about the content of the talks that they're giving to the CEO peer groups. But before we do that, let me start with you, Angelo. Can you share a little bit about your background for those who may not know you?
Okay, absolutely. First of all, I would call myself a fractional chief marketing officer or brand strategist, and I work with companies on a fractional basis in their C-suite to help them develop long-term strategic plans, marketing strategies, messaging, positioning, new product launches, and things like that. And I've been doing that now for about 4 years, but I've got about 25 plus years. I'm going to cheat on my age a little bit, about 25 plus years in the marketing world, both advertising agency and client side as well.
And I've had the good pleasure of seeing some of the output of the strategic planning work and the marketing development that Angelo has helped companies do, and it is first class and awesome to have a plan that they can execute.
So, yeah, absolutely.
I'm a big fan of the kind of work that Angelo does. Also, I'm a big fan of Rich Cocuzzo. So, Rich, tell us a little bit about kind of your background. How you got to sales velocity.
Well, thank you, Rick, and pleasure to be here on the show, and Happy New Year to you and all your listeners. Similar to Angelo, I am a fractional executive as well, except I'm over on the sales side. So fractional sales VP or fractional chief sales officer. And when you hear that title, fractional, all that means is that you're working with multiple clients on a part-time basis. That's fractional. And it is exploding, that whole space, absolutely exploding on the back end of the Great Recession, because small and mid-market companies are recognizing that they can bring in talent at a much higher level of expertise and experience and not have to have a full-time employee. So for me, my path, I was with FedEx for 30 years in a variety of sales and sales leadership roles, and 2 years ago pivoted over to the consulting space and have been doing the fractional sales VP gig since then.
So I think this fractional model is outstanding for middle market and fast-growing companies who need experience and talent, but either can't afford the full-time rate or need it in spurts to help with projects and kind of because they're just developing these things. So if you're not familiar with this idea of fractional support for your company, ladies and gentlemen, because mostly business owners and CEOs listen to the Critical Mass Radio Show, I'd encourage you to do some more work, especially to augment the talent that's already on your team. Maybe you could set the context. I'll start with you, Rich. What kind of companies do you help? What's your niche?
So my target is typically $5 to $50 million. Small, mid-sized companies, depending on how you define mid-size, right?
Right.
And in that case, it's all industries, so it's industry agnostic, and they could be family-owned, but typically, privately owned companies at that revenue range. And as far as folks that I'm servicing, the typical engagement, it's with a business owner or CEO that is at some level of pain or dissatisfaction with the current performance of their company as it relates to growing revenue, and that typically ties back to sales and marketing.
That's a common thing that I hear, that it takes to the point where they have a pain or they're greatly dissatisfied many times for business owners and CEOs to go out and find outside talent to help them solve a problem. I would suggest respectfully that you can fix the problem before it gets to be a pain, or you can prevent it from ever becoming a pain by being on the front end of that and sort of planning in advance of that so that you don't have to experience the pain to get the results. Angelo, who do you help?
Well, very similar. I target small to medium-sized businesses. I usually say around 2 million to about 100 million, depending on the makeup of the company. I have experience in both B2B and B2C. I would say right now, probably the bulk of my business has been maybe at 60-40 on the B2B side. And typically, the client has come to some strategic issue or strategic problem. Many times my clients have marketing people on staff, but they're more tactical in nature, and they really need to bring in that strategic thinking. I do get my hands dirty when necessary, but usually come in at that higher level to look at, what is that long-term plan and how can we move the company forward. And again, my goal is always business growth, and whether that revolves around marketing and or sales or even operations and HR and other things that I do get involved with.
So the loyal listeners who are listening to us maybe live here on octalkradio.net or as a podcast on one of the many podcasting platforms that we populate each week, or maybe you're watching a video of us either live on YouTube right now under OC Talk Radio or maybe on our YouTube channel after we put it up as a video. Nonetheless, part of the strategy of bringing these two gentlemen together, Rich and Angelo, is that there's such a complement between sales and marketing that when they're working together, and there's no reason in a middle market company that your sales and marketing department shouldn't be joined at the hip and working together and being tightly coupled, you can really move the business quickly on the growth plan with the consensus that these two people have. So as a part of the curriculum for the CEO peer groups in the critical mass community, these gentlemen have put together a presentation and a talk and a workshop that they're leading the community through. So I asked them to come on the radio show and to just highlight a little bit kind of what the main idea of their talk is. And so, Angelo, I'm going to ask you to start. Maybe what is the title of your talk? And from your perspective, what are you trying to help the members of the critical mass community to become more educated and better informed about?
Sure. The title is 2019, Are You Ready to Compete? And the really basis premise of that is setting a game plan. What is your strategy? How are you going to grow your business as you look as 2019 and you've still got, 360 days left in the year instead of waiting to the end of the year and trying to figure it out. So we really play around this idea of game plan, and we take on a football theme basically, and we talk about and really thinking about, it's moving the ball forward. It's we use one of the videos. It's from on any Sunday. We're talking about it's a game of inches, right? And that's like life, and that's like business. One move left, one move right, things can happen. And so really, how do you as a business plan for growth, plan for contingencies, and really taking our guidance that we give in the presentation about how to really plan for these and get prepared to move your business forward.
And Rich, what's your perspective on the talk?
It's interesting because it is true. Life is a game. Life and business is a game of inches. And, the way we try to frame it up, Rick, is, the timing's perfect. It's beginning of 2019. So
right.
How did you do in the year that just ended? If you think about it from a sports standpoint, we're in the playoffs right now for the NFL. A lot of teams didn't make it. So you assess the season that was, what worked, what didn't work, how do we get better? Same thing holds true with business owners and with entrepreneurs. 2018 is over. What worked, what didn't work? What are your goals for this coming year? And how are you going to get there? Because you've got to have a plan. And that's really what we drill down on, right, is helping them advance the ball and score so they can have a winning season in 2019.
So I know that you, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I know that you've delivered this talk. You've begun to deliver this talk. You're going to be delivering it over the next 2 months to all the different groups within the community, the 6 different groups that we have within Critical Mass. What is the early returns and reviews, if you will, and how's it play in Peoria?
Well, in Peoria, it did really well. We gave our first presentation last week. Our next presentation is Thursday.
Right.
And we gave it to one of the new critical mass groups, Women's Peer Power Learning. Mm-hmm. I think I got that title right. And it was well received. We really gave a lot of insights and guidance for the group to really think about and reflect on their business. One of the interesting things that Rich and I did is we put together a series of questions, more than an assessment, and we had them score how they ranked in those questions.
Wow.
And then we came up with a model that basically said, hey, you're in trouble. Hey, you're doing really well. Or, here's some of the things you need to look at. And so we gave them that feedback as part of how well did you do in 2018? Where do you stand today? And then the rest of the talk was about how we can change those things and move them forward.
Well, it's almost like you gave them free consulting. I mean, you really gave them sort of an assessment, didn't you, from your sales and marketing perspective?
Oh, absolutely. And shout out to that group because they were very candid and honest in their feedback. So that kind of set the bar for the other groups, right, that we'll be meeting with.
Right.
But, it's important to understand where you are and how do you, move, again, how do you move forward? How do you achieve your goals in 2019? And what we tried to do as well, Rick, because understanding there's different folks in the audience. There's some folks that are part of a bigger team.
Mm-hmm.
There's some folks that are solopreneurs like Angelo and myself, and we try to put it in the right context for them, regardless of their situation. What you can do differently to be more effective to help you achieve your goals in the year ahead.
So I'm talking with Rich Cocuzzo and Angelo Ponzi. Angelo, again, you wanted to say something?
I
Please,
did.
go ahead.
You know me. I'm trying to hold my hands back because we're all three Italians sitting at the table. I want to be.
You may want to watch this one on video.
Well, one of the things I wanted to say was, part of our presentation, we talk about the commitment and that the founders or the CEOs need to do. And I was going to reflect on a presentation to one of the groups last year where we did an assessment and some other groups talking about how much time do you spend on your business. And
Right.
I think, we heard some really light numbers. I think it was less than 5%, those kinds of things. And I think that's one of the things we also wanted to communicate during our presentation is it takes time and commitment. And so we gave them directions and things they could do to help focus, to spend more time in their business as well. And I thought that was really good on our part.
Right, and that a key part of the learning for adults, and certainly in the Critical Mass CEO peer group community, is getting actionable ideas that you can implement easily when you get back to the office to kind of get them positive momentum going. I mean, frankly, we can be exposed to a lot of great ideas. We can read a ton of books and watch a bunch of videos, but if we don't ever do anything with that information, then it really isn't making much of a difference in the business. We have a definite bias towards action within the community. I don't want to go through the table of contents of the talk, but we have about 5 minutes left here on Critical Mass Radio Show and Podcast. I'm wondering if you guys might just provide a overview of kind of where you took them in the presentation and during the workshop.
Want to start?
Sure. And once we had an assessment, the self-assessment of how they did in 2018, what we tried to do is walk them through, now what? Right? Where do you go from here?
Right.
And the importance of planning, strategic planning, and not just to say that you did it and then it goes into a file cabinet, never to be looked at again or until a year later.
Right.
But having it as a living, breathing plan, and the importance from a leadership standpoint, you've got to be able to communicate with your team, whether that's part of a larger group or if you're a solopreneur, could be your referral partners. Communicating to the team, here's the goals for 2019. Let's talk about how we're going to get there. And having that understanding and that employee engagement, right? That, hey, we're all part of the same team. We want to win. Let's talk about each individual role and how we're going to be successful in executing on this plan. So we walk them through that, and we talk about the importance of leadership, communication, talk about the importance of delegation, right? Very often with leaders, I'll just do it myself because I want it done right? So talk through that. And really, from a planning standpoint, we referenced Stephen Covey a couple of times, beginning with the end in the mind.
Sure.
And really focusing on things that are important but not urgent. Don't wait until it becomes a crisis. So, really a methodical step-by-step approach to effective leadership, goal setting, how to achieve plans, how to get employee buy-in, importance of culture, all those things.
Very practical.
Yeah.
Very practical.
Right. And then at the end, we kind of took those ideas and we summed it up with some actions that they could look at, and then really drove that home with, here's some of the steps, here's the things you need to do and need to think about. And then we have some videos smattered throughout the program. We actually did some whiteboarding.
Nice.
I'm excited about that. I can't wait for you to see it. We had hired this really expensive hand model.
Hand model, yeah. He was Italian too.
Of course, why not? They're the best hand models, I hear, the Italians. So we have Angelo Ponzi and Rich Cocuzzo. We only have a few minutes left. You talked about the interactivity and the tools that you have, as well as the assessment. Are there other resources that you two have built that you make available? Maybe people who aren't in the critical mass community that would like to learn about what you presented to the group?
Sure. I think that if someone's interested, they certainly, I know we'll give out contact information later on. They could send me an email. We can send them the link to the assessment, and then we'd be happy to take what they've done and actually frame it up into our results package and send it back out to them. there's other things that I've done in previous groups. On my website, I have a ebook on storytelling, an ebook on competitive intelligence, which is part of our conversation as well, and things like that. So, if they wanted to email us, we certainly can email them back some assessment tools.
Great. Do you want to add anything to that, Rich?
No, Angelo's spot on with what he shared with the community. Specific to sales, I have something that helps assess sales agility. So if somebody wants to get into the weeds and look specifically at their sales organization, their level of effectiveness, like Angelo said, just feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to help.
Well, it's exciting because the type of companies that you're working with, the CEO is close enough to the business to really still understand it, but hopefully has a management structure that allows them to not be solely focused in this area. But this area, I believe that all founders and CEOs should be and view themselves as an extension of the sales and marketing team within the company, because there are just certain things that the CEO can do in the marketplace that nobody else can do, especially if they're the business owner.
Yeah,
do you
absolutely,
agree?
Absolutely. And I think, too, and I'm going to speak for you, Rich, and you can tell me I'm crazy, but I think for some of your listeners as well, if there's somebody out there that fits within our target and the kind of companies we service, we'd be happy to take on a phone call and do an assessment over the phone, get to meet them, and, listen to their stories and see where their pain points are, and maybe we can, give them some guidance as well.
Right.
Yeah, and Rick, I think you would agree. Sales and marketing are the growth engine of any company, and our focus here is to help companies not just survive but thrive.
Right.
And take advantage of the good economic times that we're in right now, because this too shall pass. But we all know that everything runs in cycles, and some analysts, experts think this is getting towards the end of this economic expansion, and we want to do our little best to help expand it and extend it as long as possible.
Well, regardless of what happens this year, knowing about and implementing best practices is never a bad idea.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And especially in the front end of the business, because the downstream impact of more sales, many times a little bit more revenue can allow the degrees of freedom that a CEO has that they can't have at a lower revenue level. So if someone would like to, and I certainly hope they will, reach out to you. Angelo, let's start with you. How do they find Angelo Ponzi?
Well, the easiest way is on LinkedIn, as Angelo Ponzi, or my website, theponzigroup.com.
How do you spell that?
ThePonzigroup.
Perfect.
Would probably be the best way to reach out to me, and my email is on that site as well.
Okay, Rich, how do they find you?
LinkedIn is the easiest way, and it's Rich Cocuzzo, Cocuzzo.
Just like it sounds, ladies and gentlemen.
Got it.
Well, thank you guys for being my first interview back after the short holiday break. I was excited to have you both in the studio to talk about this presentation. The feedback, I wasn't in the room that day that you delivered it, but I will be there on Thursday. But the word that I got back from Dr. Sean was you guys, your content rich, great interactivity. And actually, I would suggest if you're a meeting planner or you're looking for some two good speakers to deliver content to middle market CEOs, reach out to either one of these two guys, and based on what I've heard, you won't be disappointed. So thank you for being friends of the program and part of the Critical Mass community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
I've enjoyed it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank our engineer, Paul Roberts. It's good to be back here and seeing him, as well as our three producers without whom I could not do this show, Joan Park, Crystal Nunley, and Haley Stern. If you want to connect with me, let's do it on LinkedIn. I'm Richard Franzi, Franzi. And until our next show, I hope all of your business decisions will move your company in a positive direction.